Colin. Guess I better get this out. Colin. Hey, keep an eye out. Yeah. Yeah. Good evening and welcome to the February 24th, 2025 Council Committee meeting. I'm Council President Kurt Knappen, Ward 3, and I will be chairing this meeting. I will now do a roll call at this time. Sierra Whitted, Ward 1.
Present.
Tony Gillette, Ward 1.
Present.
Jeannie Murphy, Ward 2.
Present.
Are you still with us, Jeannie?
Yeah, present.
Okay, great. Mike Kimling, Ward 2.
Present.
Angela Steens, Ward 3.
Present.
Jacqueline Walters, Ward 4.
Present.
Laurel Birchfield, Ward 4.
Present.
Next, I'd like to explain our procedures for public input. In an effort to enhance citizens' ability to present information to the governing body, anyone interested in addressing the governing body is strongly encouraged to register to speak by noon on the day of the meeting, but it is not required. Information has been posted online about how to sign up. By policy, comments are limited to 5 minutes and no person may speak more than once to any one agenda item. Only comments related to city business are permitted. Disruptive acts are not permitted as per policy statement number 7 and will not be tolerated. After you are finished speaking, please sign the form on the podium to ensure we have an accurate record of your name and address. Additionally, comments can be submitted to the entire governing body via email at governingbody@cityofshawnee.org. There are 2 items on tonight's agenda. Item 1 is to discuss the 2025-2026 benefits renewal. City Manager Paul Kramer will kick off the discussion. Paul.
Thank you, Councilmember Knappen. For this item, I'm going to introduce our HR Director, Kelly Grisnick, to do an intro and then introduce our guest for tonight.
Good evening. To talk about information pertaining to our 2025-2026 benefit renewal, which includes our medical, dental, and vision insurance. As you know, the city's benefit year runs from July 1 through June 30th of each calendar year. And in anticipation of the 2025-26 renewal, we engage with Brown & Brown to assist us with our process. In working with Brown & Brown, our ultimate goal was to minimize any rate increases and also minimize any disruption to our employees' coverage. Brown & Brown went out to bid with a number of medical, dental, and vision providers. They were able to negotiate and renegotiate some opportunities and benefit plans that I believe reached our goal. Reggie Brown from Brown & Brown is here tonight to give you an overview and present our recommendations for the 2025-26 benefit renewal. The recommendation is to move forward the proposed renewal to the governing body for consideration. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Reggie to provide the presentation and answer any questions.
Great, thanks, Kelly. Can everyone hear me okay? Make sure I have that right. Okay, good. So good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining. So we'll talk a little bit of claims history here as we talk about why we ended up where we did with the renewal itself, particularly for the medical and pharmacy plan. And then we'll get into some dental and vision discussion as well. First things first, again, with about 350 employees being insured under this fully insured plan through Blue Cross Blue Shield of Kansas, the claims experience really pretty much dictates the premium. It's a fully credible plan in that sense that prior claims experience is going to be a predictor of future claims experience and thus the premium that will be presented for the 2025-26 renewal. As a result, then, as we look at the prior claims experience, we're seeing that net claims, so this is a combination of medical claims and pharmacy claims. After then any high case forgiveness, they're up about 16% from July 2024 through December of 2024. Premiums for that same time period are up about 7.5%. What that ultimately means is that we're at about a gross loss ratio of about 100%. When we then net out large claims, we're at a net loss ratio of about 88%. And that's important. First of all, if we look at the gross loss ratio, that's pretty much at 100.7%. That basically means is Blue Cross has paid out more claims than they've collected in premiums. And that's dollar for dollar, they've paid out more claims. There's some calculations that go on in the overall formula there of the development of the premium. And as a result, there is some forgiveness of large claims that occur, but for that, there's a charge within the premium. So that's why we really ultimately end up talking about that net loss ratio at 87.6%. And that's again, when we pull out these large claims over the pooling point of $125,000. So those are individual claimants that have had claims over $125,000. So like I said, that's a net loss ratio of 87.6. The target loss ratio is about 75%. So whether we're looking at gross loss ratio, if we're looking at net loss ratio, Blue Cross is essentially paid out more claims than they've collected in premiums. We did take this plan to market for this upcoming renewal, as Kelly had indicated. Ultimately, we didn't receive any competitive proposals back from the market. We looked, again, this is a fully insured plan. So the primary carriers here in this market include United Healthcare, Aetna, and Cigna, as well as Blue KC. All of them were coming in at a rate increase of which would have been in excess of 20%, or they were just outright denying to quote. And so from a competitiveness standpoint, we really didn't have many to come forth there. One of the key drivers of those results, essentially from the market, was really kind of, again, particularly the ongoing large claim exposure. So again, unfortunately, there are several specific situations within the population that can really kind of dictate those premiums because of the ongoing nature of those claims. This slide just really kind of speaks to that a little bit. Again, for this particular plan year, so since 2024-25 plan year, so since July of 2024, we've had 6 individuals already go over the $100,000 mark. And those 6 individuals make up about 1.2 million of the overall 3.7 million or so in claims that have been paid year to date. So that's high, but it's not actually quite as volatile as it's been in prior years. This year, one of the other cost drivers that we're seeing is a greater volume of claims under that 125K spec level or pooling point. And so, it's a little bit of both in that we still have the underlying high case exposure going on, but then we have a little bit more volatility or volume, I should say, of claims maybe in that $50,000 to $100,000 range, particularly as we're only halfway through the year. So the renewal itself, as I said, we took this out to market. It wasn't all that fruitful, especially when we compare what Blue Cross came in as the renewal, kind of the baseline renewal. Ultimately, they came in at about a 12.5%, 12.6% premium increase projected for 25-26. And that was basically, that's assuming the base plan, meaning essentially that is mirroring the current pharmacy formulary, mirroring the current network that is being used through Blue KC. And for the most part, with one caveat, which I'll speak to, it mirrors the current plan design that's in place today. The one caveat is there is an IRS mandated increase on the high deductible plans. So there's 2 HDHP plans offered. You'll see them listed to the far right in the columns here. You'll see that basically the individual deductibles are going from $3,200 in both of those plans to $3,300. And that's a mandated IRS change to keep those plans as embedded HDHP plans with a HSA account associated with them. The family deductible is going up as well from $6,400 to $6,600 on those 2 plans. Beyond that, there are no other plan changes associated with this, again, what I'll call kind of baseline offer through Blue KC. They continue forth with a wellness fund that we use and invest back into the population. And then this proposal also would continue to assume the HSA contribution from the city to those employees that enroll in the HDHP plans, either one of those 2. So that total dollar increase from a gross dollar perspective. So today, the total premium before subtracting out for any employee contributions is just a little over 6.9 million, and that's reflected in row 25. A 12.6% increase would take that total gross premium to about 7.8 million annually. It's about an $875,000 increase. So obviously we went to work. We wanted to look at how can we mitigate this. Obviously there's several levers that can be pulled. Most of the time when we're talking about mitigating the cost increase, though, it unfortunately requires us dipping into employees' pockets in the forms of higher deductibles, out-of-pocket maximum copays, et cetera. Or maybe limiting coverage through maybe a more restrictive pharmacy formulary, a more restrictive network, things of that nature. So we looked at a whole host of options, and ultimately the one that we're recommending at this point involves a couple of different changes. So the first is increasing the out-of-pocket maximums. So rows 4 and 5 show that the current out-of-pocket maximum for the 2 PPO plans that are being offered, they have a $2,500 out-of-pocket maximum for single coverage and $5,000 for family. So essentially what that means is me as an individual, if I'm enrolled in coverage, I pay my deductible, I pay my coinsurance, I pay my copays. That all accumulates to a max exposure of $2,500 in the plan year. That for the PPO plans is going up in this proposal from $2,500 to $3,000 for individual. And for those enrolled in family, it would go up from $5,000 to $6,000. If I'm in family coverage and I have myself, my spouse, 2 children on the plan, let's say, I basically individually would meet that $3,000 out-of-pocket maximum, but we would be capped at $6,000 as a combined unit. On the HDHP plans, those out-of-pocket maximums are currently at $4,000 for single and $8,000 for family. The proposal here is that they would go up $1,000 from $4,000 to $5,000 in single and from $8,000 to $10,000 for family coverage. Those 2 changes basically on their own from an out-of-pocket perspective save us about 2.5% on the overall premium. It's about $180,000 premium save. So it takes it from a 12.6% increase to about just right at 10%. So down from that $875,000 increase to about a $697,000 increase, call it. Again, we looked at this a lot of different ways. We looked at raising deductibles, we looked at raising copays, et cetera. Ultimately, we felt that the out-of-pocket maximum sort of gave us the most bang for our buck in that it gave us the most premium save while impacting the fewest amount of individuals. Generally speaking, in the population, about 20% of the population is going to hit the out-of-pocket maximum, whereas if we were touching deductibles, we'd be looking at impacting about 80 to 90% of the population. So that's kind of how we arrived at this particular recommendation. The other piece that we're adding here, and I think again is a little bit of maybe a consolation as we talk about increasing out-of-pocket maximum kind of on the PPO plans and the HDHP plans. We've looked at this in years past, and finally we felt like with this year and kind of how the renewal is structured, we are proposing going ahead and adding a Spira option as well. So there's a Spira facility through Blue KC. It's a Blue KC primary care clinic, essentially, over off Shawnee Mission Parkway. And we're proposing adding that as an option for the staff to enroll in. It's a narrow network offering. So from a hospital perspective, they would still have Advent and network, KU Med, for example, children's, basically all the facilities that you think of in the metro besides St. Luke's facilities and HCA facilities. They would then also have access to those docs, say at Advent or KU, for example, to still use those docs for primary care services or specialist visits. However, the advantage of going to the Spira Care Clinic is that they would get basically free coverage, so 100% coverage through the Spira Clinic. We get a lot of requests from staff around having an on-site clinic, and ultimately we've looked at that in the past and it just hasn't been feasible for a number of reasons. And so we felt like this was a little bit of a consolation from a convenience standpoint and also a low cost entry point.
Reggie, is that a Spira indicated in a certain line here?
Yeah, sorry. So it's in column M. So it's, I know that's hard to see.
Oh, I see.
I'm not going to attempt to blow that up because I'm going to mess the whole spreadsheet up.
No, I see it.
Yeah, it's in column M there, and we're making an estimate as to what the enrollment might be for that plan.
Yeah.
It's anyone's guess. At this point, the natural folks that might select that would come out of the current PPO narrow offering or the Blue Select Plus option. So essentially, just kind of to throw a dart, we've ultimately said that about 25% of that enrollment would enroll in here. It's honestly not going to move the needle much, plus, up or down from an overall premium standpoint. We look at it more as a convenience access option. And then we'll kind of see what the uptick looks like, and maybe we could tweak that in future years.
Well, and I will note that unless I'm wrong, I believe that Spira Clinic is literally right around the corner.
Yeah, it is.
right here at Neiman and Shawnee Mission Parkway. So it's close for at least people that work in this building.
Yeah, and they've built more, I want to say 5 or 6 just around the metro in general. From a contribution perspective, so that, that everything we've talked about up until this point is gross premium. So the total premium that Blue KC is essentially charging for next year's renewal. This slide really starts to break down then what that cost split would be then for between staff and the city itself. Essentially, again, we're looking at about a 10% increase overall. And so that premium increase is just being shared at the current cost split. So today, the blended cost split between all of the various tiers and plan designs that are offered is about an 85-15 cost share, meaning that about 85% of that gross premium that I talked about, that roughly 7.6 million is 85% of that, or 6.5 going forward, be picked up by the city, and 15% is picked up through these contributions that we're talking about here by staff, about 1.13 million or so. And those dollars that I indicated, those annualized dollars, are all reflected in rows 24 through 28. 24 shows the total gross premium, and the breakout of that is in rows 26 for the city share and 28 for the employee share. Overall, depending upon the plan that they're in for single coverage, we're looking at about a $6 to $10 a month increase for single coverage. And then again, employee plus ones, somewhere between 24 and 32. Family coverage is going up about $34 to $44 a month. Again, all that equates to about a 10% increase. Dental and vision. So as I said, we looked at not only the medical and pharmacy plans this year, but we also looked at the dental and vision plans throughout the market as well. Dental came back at a flat increase from Delta. And we looked at some other options in the marketplace, had 1 or 2 that were slightly below Delta. However, there was going to be a pretty decent network shift with that. And so we felt to limit disruption there, we wanted to recommend staying with Delta for another year, given that there was no premium increase there and no disruption to the members. From a network perspective, plan design will remain as is as well. We were able to get, for what it's worth, an additional year of rate guarantee with a cap of 4% for the 7/1/26 renewal. So something we'll analyze again as you look at claims experience and see if it's that makes sense, whether it's something again we want to look at the market again or not. On the vision side, had some more competitive options on the vision. And so we looked at that one pretty hard, but through the actually IMED was offering a fairly competitive rate and network proposal. And so we were able to leverage that though. So we went back to Surrency, we were able to get a 5% premium reduction. But I think the more beneficial thing about this was that they have a plus provider network, just kind of their enhanced providers. And about 40% of the staff is accessing those providers today. And through this enhanced plan, basically, if I'm going in for an exam, I pay $10 today. If I happen to now use a plus provider going forward, that exam would be a no cost. Also would get additional allowances for frames, et cetera, through some of those plus providers. So essentially lowered the premium, enhanced the plan a little bit there. I thought that was a nice win.
You said that was a 5% reduction. What I see is a 3.7% reduction.
So the 3.7 on the right is an illustrative cost projection. We just took the claims experience, and this is basically just our math, looking at claims for experience and trending it forward. The 5% is up on clicker works. There. No, anyway, under the Surrency columns there, you'll see current renewal and then firm renewal. So we ended up there. Again, this is all employee paid dollars, but that annual premium is going from 38.37 or 397 to 36,483. That's the 5% I'm talking about.
Thank you.
That comes with a 4-year rate guarantee as well. Disclosures, I don't have anything else to disclose. I'll take questions and comments though.
Okay, thank you, Reggie. Are there any council questions to staff? Tony.
Reggie, thanks for your hard work again this year. Appreciate all that you do. Really appreciated the opportunity to meet with staff and you offline and go through the numbers last week. So with that, the only two questions I have for you is, we asked this earlier, so I know your answer on it, but it's for the public record because I think it's important in today's world. Our cities in Johnson County or in Kansas pooling their resources to try and come up with a way to lower some of these costs instead of us standing as our own municipality?
Not collectively, no. So the most of the core cities that we're comparing to here, they are on their own, whether that be a fully insured or self-funded group. They're not pooling at this point.
So in your professional opinion, we're not seeing that as a potential trend anytime in the near future either?
I would say yes, cautiously. I mean, anything can happen. This is a really kind of volatile, ever-changing market right now, particularly with the provider community and the insurance companies in the area. So, you know, things are changing quickly as far as that goes. And so new provider contracting, et cetera. So at this point in time, no, but you know, I would reserve that, you know, things can change quickly.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I figured that was your answer on it, but as costs continue to go up double digits, as we're seeing the last 4 years, I think at some point there's going to be a breaking point in the market. You know, it's going to start pushing the other direction.
Sure.
So appreciate the fact that you're on that and alert for looking for that. And then the only final other question I had for you is, you did a great job last year coming out with a number that what we anticipated going up, and it came in lower. So with your professional magic again, any chance that we may see this come back even a hair bit lower than what's being projected at this point?
I mean, I won't rule it out. I don't want to set myself up for failure in that regard either, though. You know, the claims experience that we have right now is through December of 2024. So I think this goes to the council meeting in late March. Is that right? We will have January and potentially February's claims experience by then. So there's a chance we could make a case based off kind of how that looks. And so we'll certainly do our best.
Appreciate that. And anyway, we can get it below that 10 number is always
Sure.
a magic number, 10%. Everybody knows that.
Yeah.
If it's 9.8, they're like, whatever, but 10 and higher, everybody puts eyes on it. So I appreciate your hard work. Thank you, sir.
Angela.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. And I'm sorry I wasn't able to attend one of the meetings for the information
no
prior
worries.
to this. I just had a question on the wellness, you know, when they have the premium reductions and stuff. Do you have numbers on like the amount of employees that generally participate in those programs? Because obviously they can be very beneficial.
Yep. Do you specific numbers? I have general numbers. I don't have specifics right at my fingertips. Yeah. Generally, I think it's 80+% that are participating in that. It's a really, historically, it's been a really high participation rate.
That's great. And do you, I mean, and I know insurance is going up all the time. I totally get it. I think we all see that in costs and everything else. And I was just curious, have you guys ever seen, and I haven't looked this up myself, if there's research like people that are promoting and participating in these programs, if they have seen maybe a decline in some, you know, certain conditions or
Yeah,
things
it's
like
tough.
that.
You know, we look at metrics all the time. Annually, we will do a raw claims utilization report. And, you know, for the most part, we have seen since really kind of that strong investment in the city's wellness program, hospital utilization rates have kind of remained level, emergency rate, those sorts of things. Chronic condition claimants are generally adherent with their prescription drug medications, those kinds of things. The biggest cost driver, honestly, for your plan are high dollar unforeseen claims that are ongoing. Whether there's, you know, high dollar specialty medications, you know, cancer is a big one as well. And that's the tough part about the wellness programs. I think the wellness programs are great and they do a great job, I think, for morale as well. And just, again, kind of, you know, collectively building that goodwill. But unfortunately, there's a lot of things that are out of our control there. And that's honestly the biggest cost driver of those premiums and those high dollar claims as we looked at them year over year. Yep.
Anyone else? I've got a question and I'll just make a comment before we let you go. How would you characterize the openness of our pharmacy benefit program? Like, for example, are GLP-1s available?
GLP-1s for diabetic, type 2 diabetes diagnosis, yes. they're
Not for weight
available
loss.
For not for weight loss.
How would you characterize in general the restrictiveness of our pharmacy benefit program?
I would say GLP-1s, while you're not covering from a weight loss perspective, most employers still are not. From what we're seeing from our benchmark standpoint, we see that about 75% of employers are not covering GLP-1s for weight loss at this point in time. Some that have are in some ways trying to scale that back as well and put additional prior auths in place, et cetera, just because it's a pretty significant immediate cost increase.
Oh, I know.
Now, there's a case to be made for the long-term efficacy of that and what does it do? But that upfront investment is hefty.
Yeah.
I would say then, though, from the overall openness of the formulary, I'd say it's pretty friendly in that regard.
Good.
So,
Good. And the only comment I would make is I didn't get a chance to meet with you this year, but I sat on, before this year, we had a benefits task force. And so I've had a lot of meetings with you and
Mhm.
you guys do a great job. You do always bring them down and figure out a creative solution to get to. I mean, this is a painful process and 10.1% increase every year is painful, but I think you do a really good job. And I know that we do have a lot of large claims that our pool makes it especially difficult. But a 10.1% increase with medical, essentially neutral with dental, and a 5% reduction with vision is probably about as good as we could ask for. I think employees are, in the end, the heart of our organization and getting done everything that we need to get done in the city. And so we want to support them, certainly. And so thank you for your efforts. Okay, and so I guess no more questions from the council. Did anyone sign up to make comments? And is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak on this item? Yes. You got to come up to the podium. And if you'll state your name and address. Thank you.
I run the benefits for a large company. I'm just curious if you've ever thought about going self-funded for the plan. The premiums for that many people, that's a high cost. And have you considered using a non-insurance carrier PBM? Like
So-
Right Way or?
Can we get it on microphone? That's
Sorry.
the whole reason is we're in a public meeting. That's why I
I'm
just
sorry.
gotta.
Going self-funded.
Yeah.
Because your cost is very high. The cost for the last company that I was in charge of benefits, we had 1,700 people and our premiums, our total cost was 15 million. So your cost is super high. We're self-funded though. We had a deductible of $175,000 per belly button. So that's every person and dependent. But we also implemented Right Way RX, which is a non-insurance carrier PBM. And Blue Cross Blue Shield was the only one who would do it. Cigna, Aetna, UHC, they all came with their own PBMs. It costs you a fortune. So I'm wondering how many of those claims on your plan right now where it says medical, they're all pharmacy. There's no, like they're not treating, they're just going for pharmacy. And that comes in as your medical claims. And it just keeps. So.
Do
Should
you
consider
want to
it.
respond?
Yeah, I can. Yep.
Thanks, Francis.
So yeah, we have looked at self-funding. We continue to look at self-funding as an option. And I think the further we get, as we talk about what are we going to do to help continue to manage, I think it's something that continuously has to be evaluated and looked at. Previously, with the self-funding, there's a little bit of open-ended liability associated with that. From a budgetary perspective, it just hasn't been something that, we felt like was the right thing to do. So again, I think it's something we continue to look at, but at this point in time, based on that I shouldn't say open-ended liability. There's more liability with that. There are caps that you can put in place around it. But that's been the issue ultimately in the past. And the pharmacy piece is, yes, more flexibility is going to come with a self-funded program from a pharmacy standpoint, for sure.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the audience that would like to speak? And final call, does anybody on the council have any more comments? Okay, the recommended action is to forward the proposed benefits package to the March 24th City Council meeting for consideration. A majority support is needed to forward the item. I will accept a motion. We don't usually do that in council committee. Yes, Angela?
Move to forward.
No,
Or motion?
no, she
Oh.
doesn't.
I'm just reading my script.
Sorry.
So what do you, just a nod, does it?
Yeah. Just,
The nod.
Everybody good?
yep. Okay.
All right, I got a lot of thumbs up. So the non-motion passes. Item number 2, thank you, Reggie. Item number 2 is to review a review of short-term rental regulations. City Manager Paul Kramer will kick off the discussion. Paul?
Thank you, Councilmember Nappen. The much anticipated one-year review of the short-term rental program will be kicked off here in a second by our city attorney, Jenny Smith. This is informational purposes from staff to the governing body, and we look forward to answering any questions you have. I do believe we have some members of the public here tonight to express their thoughts, and so I'm going to turn this over to Jenny to get us kicked off.
Thank you. So if we all recall, we passed some short-term rental business license regulations in February of 2024. They had to be published, so really they went into effect in about March of 2024. So we have been under that rule for about a year now. Those new license, people are required to register the short-term rentals and pay a license fee. That new $500 went into effect in February 2024, but in all likelihood, they already had their license, so everybody was paying that new fee in September of 2024. So just a discussion about how we got to where the regulations we have today. So we had about 6 council committee discussions from 2023 to 2024 that really narrowed our focus to what we ended up with. I think there were a lot of discussions in the beginning, and I'm giving a history because I think there were some members of the governing body who are sitting here today that weren't here when these regulations were passed. So just giving you a history of how we got to the regulations we got to. There were talks in the beginning about doing a zoning change. We didn't have a great avenue within our code to zone short-term rentals differently in R1 districts, and we didn't feel like at the time that fit what we were wanting. We also talked about the use of special use permits. We talked about how that was a lengthy process to get every single short-term rental through the planning commission, that it have to come before the governing body. And at that time, I think we were looking at around 60 short-term rentals. And that was going to take a lot of legwork from staff to get it through both public bodies to get short-term rentals licensed. And I think there was some urgency of getting things licensed and getting regulations on the books. So special use permits really didn't fit what we needed at the time. We also talked about treating corporations and individuals differently. In the eyes of the law, in the eyes of the law, corporations and individuals are treated really similarly because corporations can have vested property rights just like individuals can. So we didn't really see a benefit to treating corporations and individuals differently because everybody in essence would be treated the same. We talked about a destination-based approach, and at one point we were pretty close to moving forward with allowing short-term rentals in TSQ, which is Town Square, which is the area right around City Hall, and then also in mixed use. But ultimately what we ended up with was that anybody who wanted to run a short-term rental needed to get a business license. And then of course, at the end of that process, getting to business licenses, we talked about having a 1-year review, and that's what we're doing tonight. So just a reminder about what our regulations say. Anytime somebody wants to rent their home for less than 30 days, they have to register as a short-term rental. That requires a $500 fee. There are a number of regulations that apply. You can't have more than 2 adults per bedroom plus an additional adult with a maximum of 10 persons allowed to be in the short-term rental. They have to abide by all noise restrictions, parking restrictions, all of our health safety regulations, and that's where that trash portion comes into play. They also have to abide by any public peace and welfare regulations, and that's where all of our criminal code comes into play. Also in there is information about we can't use short-term rentals as a reception space, party space, et cetera. And those, of course, again, were enacted in late February 2024, but really March 2024. So by the numbers, since we enacted these rules, we have 28 licenses that were granted. 4 voluntarily withdrew their license for one reason or another. 1, of course, was revoked by the governing body. And as it sits today, we have 23 current licensed short-term rentals. We estimate, just by looking at some numbers through Airbnb and VRBO, that there's about 40 to 60 unlicensed short-term rentals. And we're getting that from, you see that $94,000 collected in transient guest tax. We don't think that 23 short-term rentals generated that much revenue. So we think we're probably closer to that 40 to 60 additional unlicensed short-term rentals. And then we received 14,000 in license revenue for that $500 license. Complaint wise, I removed the complaints that were centered around the short-term rental whose license revoked. That one received a lot of complaints. So removing that one, we had 4 properties that were complained about. One of them was the one that was discussed during the council meeting earlier tonight. We had 23 total complaints at those 4 properties. 7 were for trash, 2 for weeds, and 1 for snow on sidewalks. In comparison, so that's 23 on those 4 properties. In comparison, 5130 Ballantyne had 13, and that was the one we revoked. If you want to compare these numbers to general codes complaints in the calendar year of 2024, we had over 3,000 code complaints, 169 for trash and 975 for weeds. Switching more to a criminal in nature, about 911 dispatch calls. We had 18 calls for service at 8 different properties. Those 18 calls for service centered around noise, parking, a surprisingly amount of animal violations, and criminal activity, whether that be actual crimes or suspicious activities. And 2 properties alone were the basis for 11 of those calls. So putting that in perspective, in 2024, the police department had over 46,000 calls for service. That's really all the information that I have to give you to update on short-term rentals, but I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has anything specifically they want to ask us. But that's really a summary of where we've been in the last roughly 12 months.
Thank you, Jenny. And I know I've got a few questions, but let's open it up. Jacqueline.
Thank you, Jenny. I appreciate that.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Can I just maybe set this up by saying, what do you need from us tonight? What's the goal that we want to walk out of here with?
It's really up to you guys. If you want to continue as is, we can continue as is. If you want to make some changes to our code, we can make changes to our code. If you want to start anew, we can start anew. We just really need direction from you all of where you want to go from here. I don't think that staff has a recommendation. We just want to know where you want us to go from here.
So ideally, we would kind of have, by consensus, decide on a road forward to be forwarded to a city council meeting if
So-
there were changes.
Yes, if there were changes.
Right.
If there's no action, then we just, the program is in place. And this is a information only, but if there was, we would need consensus if there's a.
Okay, thank you, Jacqueline.
Thanks. That's helpful. The 40 to 60 unlicensed, is there any way to track those down? Charge them a fee for not coming to us.
It's
And-
hard because we can't on Airbnb or VRBO's website know what the exact address is. Like, for example, I had one where I generally knew the area, but it took me quite a bit to figure out where the exact home was.
Right.
A couple of things. We do just have the one license clerk. We got the stats from 2024 and we have 3,004 business licenses in the city for the one clerk. I think enforcement of that, a lot come and go. And so we do believe that there's probably that. And I know somebody could go out and find, a half dozen of them, but we need to confirm, send letters. So we just simply have not done that.
So my next question is going to be, how do we enforce that? You pretty much answered that. My concern is that this is only going to get worse as we head into 2026, 2025, the rest of 25 into 26, with the World Cup. I think a lot of people would say, oh, that's so great. I think our residents are going to say, no, that's not going to be great. That's going to be a hot mess. And we're going to have a lot of complaints on our hands of people coming from all over the world to stay in Shawnee, which is great. But we have residents who live here every day who are going to have to put up with possible, I'm not going to say what she found in her yard, but what she found in her yard. And we just don't want that. I don't want that for the residents of Shawnee. And I don't know the solution other than tighten up. I don't like the idea of a ban because I like for people to be able to have the freedom to do what they want to run a business. And I'm just a free market individual. However, not at the cost of my residents who pay taxes to live in our city, and it's a great city. And so how do we do that? I don't know. You know, she made a good point. She has to go to all of the neighbor that had the chicken coop has to go to every single neighbor in the area and say, can I have a chicken coop in my neighborhood, in my backyard? I'm like, a chicken coop? It's in the backyard. Nobody's impacted by that at all, except for that resident and maybe the neighbors right next to you. But she has to go to every house in 200 yards or whatever it is. So I don't know if that's something we could, I don't know if adding to it though solves the problem of the clerk issue, which adds more work for possibly the city staff.
Yeah, the other
So, yeah.
big concern is enforcement.
Yeah.
Had Miss King not diligently documented at
Right.
wee hours of the night, our code enforcement officers, we're not going to send them out there at midnight and
Nope.
at 10 p.m. So getting evidence that in this case was usable in court is very difficult.
Yeah.
If you have 60 or 80 to enforce those types of regulations, especially the number of people. It could be the listing, but is that enough? Because then they just change the listing. And so the enforcement part is very difficult as well on those.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me that we know that there's all these extras because we're getting the transient tax on them. And so Airbnb, if we have a regulation that they be licensed, Airbnb doesn't have a responsibility
We
to
have
make
an
sure.
agreement directly with Airbnb, so they collect them and then send them to us.
But why are they able to put something on the website if we require a business license?
When we first entered our regulations, we told them that everybody who had a short-term rental in Shawnee needed to have this license number on the listing. Making a large assumption here, they reached out to people and said, hey, if you don't have this license, you can't upload in Shawnee. Those people probably turned it off and then waited a week and turned it back on. I don't know how that's not getting enforced. We can certainly work with Airbnb and VRBO to enforce that.
I was under the impression when we passed it that overnight they'd basically be shut down because Airbnb wouldn't put them up.
Yeah, we were under the same impression.
Yeah. And then another question I have, and this is a little bit of a squirrel, but is there not a current law being proposed in Kansas House that would completely take away our ability to regulate small businesses at all? And would that impact even the Prairie Village one?
So there's a House bill, a home-based businesses bill, House Bill 2343, that does take some of those authorities away from the cities to regulate home-based businesses. Our understanding right now, as the bill sits, is that would preempt the local governing body's ability to regulate short-term rentals. However, I believe there may be some language being proposed, but that's all speculation from us at this point.
Yeah, I don't like anything that takes away our local control, and that would obviously impact.
It already passed the House. It has been moved to the Senate.
Other questions? Mike?
Yeah, I find it disturbing that there's more unlicensed than licensed ones operating in our city. And I was under the same impression that once Airbnb got the information, they were going to take these down. So I'm disappointed that we're here a year later and our option, we're just like, we thought they were going to do it. They didn't. Oh, well. I feel like it's on us to make sure that they're doing what they said that they were going to do. I mean, if I have a website advertising an activity that's illegal, I feel like it's not legal to operate one of these without a business license in our city, and they're advertising it. We don't have any kind of legal recourse. I don't understand this.
We don't have any control over Airbnb and VRBO. We can ask them to remove those listings.
We can nicely ask them. That to me, that doesn't cut it. That's ridiculous. You can't operate a short-term rental in our city without a license. True or false?
That's true.
And they're advertising for people to license or to operate a short-term rental without a license.
We have no.
We can do nothing.
We have no control over their website. And I think it's true for even like Leewood, who bans short-term rentals as well. They have troubles keeping short-term rentals off Airbnb and VRBO's website as well, as my understanding.
The president of the city is sued.
Yeah, I don't know why
This is-
we're not, because I mean, that's just absurd that they're advertising for a operation that is not allowed in this city, and that we just throw our hands up and say, oh, well. That's disturbing to me. We got more people not following the rules than following the rules. And we discussed this for at least a year, it seemed like, forever. And then when this has no teeth, it's like virtue signaling. It's like, look at us, we got something that we won't enforce or follow up.
Yeah.
Airbnb won't help us, too bad. I mean, that's awful. That's awful that we're doing that. And I mean, if we have absolutely no teeth in this law, I think we need to change it from something else, from a business license or whatever we need to do. I mean, I'm sorry, I've been using Airbnb. This last year, I've been traveling out of town. There's a bubble over the house. I mean, I can tell you the addresses of places before I booked them. It's not that difficult. So for us to say, oh, we couldn't find them. There's like satellites with outlines of the house. I don't see why we're saying we can't enforce any of this. I think it's a real failure on our end to pass something and not enforce it. Why have a law that you can't enforce? That's upsetting to me.
Right, so that's something that we could do. I've talked to a couple of different council members. I've talked to staff. If there was a desire to be more active with what we have with the existing staff to try to track them down and be more active with that, then we can go that route as well.
I know Jeannie wants to say something. Jeannie?
Yeah, I recently participated in a webinar and then had a personal conversation with the Granicus group. They were actually able to pull up for me how many short-term rentals were being advertised on a specific day, and also noted that while we're talking about Airbnb and Vrbo, there are almost 50 separate platforms. So you have to be able to go to 50 separate platforms to look, and they actually found 84 advertisements for separate houses. But again, we can go after Airbnb and Vrbo, but there are 48 other platforms out there, and that is part of the problem with finding where they are. Did receive an email today, I think, that came to the whole governing body, speaking for maintaining Airbnbs, and I have spoken to neighbors right around the street from me who live across the street from one, and they have no issues with the one in our neighborhood. So if we have technically 84 of these, but we only have a handful of houses that are generating the complaints, it seems to me that we need to be looking at that handful of houses to see if they still should qualify to retain their license. Because I'm, what did we say here? 23 complaints on 4 properties, but there are over 3,000 complaints in a year. And I can say that I have filed multiple complaints on a neighbor for the way they're parking in my neighborhood. So I think we also have to look at that balance.
Thank you. Yes, it seems like we need to go after the low-hanging fruit first, which is the few houses, the ones that are advertising 15 to 30 people. I don't know if that's true, but that was stated tonight. And then Airbnb and Vrbo, more importantly. Anybody else? Jacqueline?
Sorry, just kind of a follow-up. You know, those that are actually following our ordinance are the ones paying. I mean, it baffles me. And yet we're not going after those that we should be getting income from, that they should be going through the proper avenues, and they're getting a pass because we're not going after them. And I understand the staff component, I get that, but I would like us to put some teeth in it. I mean, it's baffling. Sorry.
There is a
Oh,
distinction
actually-
between having a license and enforcing. And so we can do both. The enforcement part, on the licensing or on we can do that. But, licensing versus, they're still beholden to all city codes. Every house is, noise codes, criminal codes, trash codes. So it's not like if you're not registered, you're not still subject to all city codes. It would just be attaining that license, which is important, but those are two distinct items.
They do have to pay a fee for that, correct?
To get the license, yes.
Right.
Yeah, but if
And
they would
then-
have a violation, it would be treated just like any other home in the city.
Right, but don't we also charge them fees for violations?
The court could, but not from just a citation or a code violation. If they got to that point, there's the notification, the remediation and all
Right,
those different.
I guess that was
Yes.
the fees that I was remembering. Thank you.
Tony.
Thank you, Kurt. I guess I missed the number, but how many homes, how many licenses do we actually have on the books today? Thank you for the presentation. It's a great starter and I really do appreciate the numbers, but did I miss it or was it stated?
23.
So we only have 23, but yet when we enacted this ordinance, it was identified even at that time that there were around 60 in our community. So as Dr. Kinling said, we're off on the wrong foot on this entire ordinance. I think everybody on this council knows exactly where I stand. I'm not going to belabor the point that I am not for short-term rentals in Shawnee in R1 zoning. I'm the council member who proposed the town square mixed use approach only. And I still think that should be considered as one of the options that we take. If we're not going to take the Prairie Village Leewood approach, which is my desire and have been since the start of this 18 months ago. I think that the destination approach needs to be on the table from a discussion point. One thing we did not hear from staff today is an update on the revoked license that we had. I realized that was only one, but I think there's ongoing complaints and concerns with the residents in that neighborhood for the one revocation that we did have. Would like kind of staff to give us kind of an update on that if you can. If you're not prepared to do that, I'll just make sure it's on the record that there's ongoing issues there. And I know there's lots of problems behind it. And so I don't know how much the other council members are aware of the ongoing problems there, but it's not resolved just because we put in an ordinance and then we did a revocation process and we went through the hoops and we followed the procedures, but here we are 1 year later, as I predicted, it would not be a resolved issue. So I'm frustrated beyond belief. It's an issue I'm passionate about. If I had a short-term rental issue in my neighborhood, I would be here at every meeting, banging the drum, having this city address this issue in R1 zoning if you don't have an HOA. So it goes without saying, unless we have some answers for the revocation process, getting everybody who does have a license on the books, and we're not getting cooperation from the sites. And I know a lot of times for short-term rentals, what they'll do is they'll book on multiple sites. So if you're on Airbnb, you're probably on Vrbo. You're not on Vrbo, you're on Home to Home, wherever you're advertising on more than one if you want the bookings numbers. So I kind of understand the game. But in the end of the day, we need to do either a couple of things. We need to scrap this whole thing, ban short-term rentals like Prairie Village did, 30 days plus only. A look at a destination approach again, which with mixed use in town square only, or adding some teeth. I know that we need to put some teeth into this on the backside as well. If you've had a revocation or a citation, there should be some fees associated with that, because obviously we're not solving the problem just yet. You should be evicted 24 hours after a revocation occurs. There's some things we're going to need to clean this up or scrap it and start over. This discussion needs to continue. Residents in my ward and others I know are frustrated beyond belief, and we have turned them into snitches, and that's crap. It's awful that we have to do that. That's number one. And it's crap that we have to turn our staff into little police force on this. So again, I think the easiest way, had we done it a year ago, was taking care of this problem from the beginning, but I'm speaking to the win. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Angela.
Thanks, Kurt. So I know we're obviously, all of our wards are a little bit different. I can just speak for Ward 3. We haven't had any issues that I'm aware of. Or at least no one's contacted me except for some of the people that actually do own some of the short-term rentals. And like I said, I struggle with this. I understand we have some problems too. I agree. There are obviously a lot of issues here, and I don't want our staff, obviously, we don't have enough people to police all these things. But I do also agree with the fact that we also have owners that are responsible. And then, so how do we do that, right? We have good people that are doing probably, I don't know a percentage, if I were to say, you know, obviously the 40 to 60 people that aren't licensing, that's not good. They should be paying a license fee. They should be following the law. Or the ordinance, I'm sorry. The other thing I would say is, how do you regulate it? It is hard, right? And then we don't want tons of regulations, but then obviously we have all these issues, so we have to have something in place. But for those people that are running it and are running theirs in a way that is compliant, it's like, then do we just punish all of them too? So yeah, I don't have any great answers. But I agree, if we are going to decide to keep them, we're going to have to probably put a lot more regulations and some kind of teeth into things, as was mentioned earlier. You know, I just got an email from a single mom that uses this as some extra income. And it is hard. A lot of people can't just work a second job or something to that effect. So, and people invest a lot into these properties as well. But I agree with you, the R1 zoning, I look at our taxpayers and people, and I've said before, and I'll say it again. Yeah, I wouldn't want to live next door to a short-term rental, especially one of these 15 to 30 people. Who are these people that are still doing this? And then I know our police have a lot more things to do or better things to do too, than to go along. And these animal thing, I'm curious about that. Can you be more specific about what the animal violations are? Because I'm thinking, a lot of these I didn't think of allowed pets that I'm aware of, but maybe they do for an extra fee or something.
It's hard for us at some of these short-term rentals. The family lives there part-time and they rent it out they rent it out part-time. So there was one that had several animal violations, and it was my understanding that we think those probably occurred when the family was there versus when it was a short-term rental, like it was a dog off leash or barking, things like that. And so I can't say with certainty that it has to do with the short-term rental. It just is associated with that address.
Okay. Thank you for that. I was just curious when you were talking about that, if there was something more like sinister going on to that effect. So those are my comments about it. I understand there is a lot of frustration. I do feel sorry for the neighbors who have had to take this on themselves to report violations and those things of that matter. And I honestly thought when we first introduced this with these stipulations, I didn't understand the court part of it. So I probably should have investigated that more. I didn't understand that we had to wait and they had to go to court and do all those things. I thought that was something that we could do. And so I apologize for not understanding that better.
You could. And so when we went through the process, it makes it much more sound if there's a court finding to go with your revocation of the license, because there are property tax rights. And in that one, because we had such good evidence, we thought, let's go through the court process. And so, but gathering that evidence, if it's not for a neighbor, is very difficult. So you could, as a governing body, if there were multiple single complaints, you could consider revocation of a license without it having to go through the court. It just makes it much more solid for the city's perspective, dealing with, some of these cities have had people come indicating, threatening legal action, and, that happens. We get sued and you deal with it, but you could do that.
Okay. I guess that's more so we don't get sued maybe by the owner.
And we haven't, so the one that we had, it was so clear. Keep in mind, this has only been in place a year, and the one that did, it took a little while, but at the end of the day, it was resolved, and we had the court findings and it got revoked. The two that have been by far the chronic ones are both licensed. So we could go through those processes. The one, it really is the trash can a lot. And so that probably would not be enough to revoke the license, as we have hundreds of those complaints, city, but you certainly could consider those without a court finding.
Thank you.
I will say, to piggyback on Angela a little bit, I have not heard of any problems in my ward. That said, I know there's a few bad apples that are really bad apples that really do threaten to ruin it for everyone. We are bringing in about 75,000 a year on this transient tax, right?
Yeah,
How much?
to your point about the 50, so we get about 75 as a combined from Airbnb and VRBO, and another 15,000. So there are home away, home to home. There's all these other sites.
So I just 94,000. So there would be some money there if we want to spend some staff time, somebody part-time or something. We could consider or even consider, I don't know, suing Airbnb and Verbo. But anyway, Laurel, you were next.
Thank you. And I think that we're having a really good conversation, and I hear a lot of passion and a lot of concern about our residents. And I'm grateful that we have a governing body that does care that much about the folks who live in our community and their safety and their well-being. But I'm also hearing a lot of things that make me pause and have a lot of concern about painting this issue trying to address this issue with a broad brush and trying to do something like a ban or change course dramatically when we do know that we have those who are following our ordinance, and we have the couple of bad apples who are not. But the things that keep popping out to me as we're having this conversation is how other communities that have banned STRs continue to have listings, the way that we have problem locations, problem properties that are not short-term rentals. They may be homeowners or long-term rentals. These are things that banning or significantly altering our ordinance around short-term rentals is not going to solve. I've lived next to neighbors who are not great neighbors and they're property owners. Fortunately not in Shawnee, but that's just part of living in a community, is that sometimes you live next to somebody who is not the best neighbor. And so I do feel for our residents who are going through this. I think that we do have something on the books that allows us to address it. I hear that we're not happy with how that is set up and how strong we can address it. I'd be really curious to hear what solutions the staff think is actually feasible, what that would cost, what kind of staffing we would have to invest in. Taking on Airbnb is a big ask. And so what would that actually take from us if that is the direction that we wanted to go, to take on a big corporation like this? I would like to know more before we kind of move forward with how successful we can be given what we have, what resources we would need to be more successful, and how we can do this in a way that doesn't harm the residents who are following the ordinance and doing the things that they need to be doing to be good neighbors in our community. Thank you.
Sierra.
Yeah, Laurel, I think you read from my notes as we were going. So from what I'm seeing is essentially we have possibly 40 to 60 businesses that if we had a ban going, those would still be running in a similar capacity, right, legally. So I don't understand what exactly would change. Like if we were to do a ban, that almost feels like we lose some teeth because we lose some avenues for action, from my understanding. This way, at least we can generate some income. People rely on this income. I don't want to completely get rid of it. I know there are problem houses in Ward 1, and we need to make sure we're addressing those. So in that sense, I would like to, I believe the term being used is teeth. I would like to see what teeth we can add to this, what we need to do to enforce it. And I mean, we worked hard on this policy. We spent a lot of time on it, and I would like to see it be enacted to its fullest.
Angela.
Thank you. Yeah, I have one more question too, because we were talking about McEnany and some of these other places where they don't have an HOA. Do we know, or, and maybe this is a broad question and we can't answer this right now. Is this mostly going on in the neighborhoods that don't have HOAs, or is this going on in both HOA? Because another concern I do have is you look at something like McEnany or some of these other really quaint neighborhoods, right, that have a lot of families in them, and we want our families, right? I mean, I want people to own homes, right? I mean, I get we can't control the people that live next door to us, and so I see that. But on the flip side, I don't want these short-term rental people just coming in here and buying up these homes either, right? Because there's corporations and people like that, and then they're buying these houses for a lot of money. And if I'm selling a house, I'm thinking, yeah, I'm going to get the most bang for my buck. So there is that consideration too, like how, and I don't even know if we can even, that's just a outward question. I don't even know if we can zero that down, but I have heard people say that they feel like a lot of these short-term rental people, they go to the cities where they know they can, right? And they're going to buy up some of these properties for that reason as well. And then a nice, another person or family or whomever who wants to buy that house, they're going to lose out because they can't afford that. So that's another concern that I think about as well. And I don't want our McEnany estates or our other neighborhood, I don't know all the ones that don't have HOAs, most of ours do around me, but becoming those kinds of places, short-term rental destinations, so to speak, where you have more, and then you don't have your neighborhoods anymore. You just have short-term rentals. So that's just a thought. Thank you.
2 points to that. So if we did an annual comprehensive review and attempt to get everybody licensed that we could track down, we could then make that list available to as a public listing, and the homeowners associations could review that list. We wouldn't proactively contact all homeowners associations, read their bylaws, see if it was allowed, but they would have that resource. On the second part, you did hit on something. There was a recent study that came out for the city of Shawnee specifically, that as a long-term rental, a specific house that was $1,700 brings in $2,400 in Airbnb revenue. So that shows there is a financial incentive to do short-term versus long-term. That is one key component of it.
So, Tony?
Yeah, just as a recap, let's go back to the very, very beginning when we started with this, made the comments, and just to reiterate for those who may not have been on the governing body at that time. But there were 9 communities in the Dallas Metroplex who put in a short-term rental ban. So to say that we can't go after Airbnb, the reason the Airbnb folks and Verbo folks, their lawyer was sitting in our audience last year when we were talking about this is because we're cutting into their business. And I don't know about you, I don't care how much revenue this ordinance generates, I don't care. I think if you own a home and you pay taxes, you ought to be able to live there in a single family neighborhood. No, you can't pick your neighbors. But if you pick a home and it's R1, it should be R1. I don't know how better I can state that. To say that we can't do the right thing is wrong. We can do the right thing. So this should be a discussion that should be ongoing moving forward this year, this calendar year. We need more information. We need to look at some other options again. I just don't think that this is working. I mean, if we identified almost 80 homes when we started, we have 23 on the books today, it's not working. It's not working. We have a revocation and they're a problem child still too. That's not working either. So as far as I'm concerned, we have not done our homework here. We have not done our job to our citizens. It's unfair. We got a lot of homework ahead of us. I know that probably frustrates staff to all get out to hear me rant on about this again, but you know what? It was my home and there was a short-term rental. There was a pain next door to me. I'd be at this council every 2 weeks as well, singing the same song. So I'm going to stand up for my folks in Ward 1 and across the city. If you don't have an HOA, short-term rentals, 30 days plus should be the rule. Prairie Village got it right. Shawnee got it wrong.
Sierra?
You made the comment about the community in Texas. I just looked that up. Grapevine, Texas is one of those that banned it, and they have 300+ properties currently with one of the bans. So I'm not sure that the ban is the best way to go for wanting to get rid of it completely here. It seems like even if that were the direction we want to take, we'd still need a way to enforce it. So I'm definitely still pro looking for ways to make sure that the businesses that have these licenses are able to operate appropriately, and those without it are not able to operate.
And Jacqueline, just a second, well, you're next. I'll just I'll go out on a limb here, and Tony, I think you've made your position very, very clear. It seems like, and it's hard to tell, it seems like the majority are still interested in seeing what more teeth we can put into this and continuing the conversation. So maybe we're moving that way, but if you don't feel that way, please speak up. And Jacqueline, you were next.
Yes, I would love for us to at least pursue that. I would love for us to look into the addresses that are listed and see what we need to do there to try and ensure that they have a business license and are operating as they should be according to our ordinance in the city of Shawnee. And, you know, as I said before, I'm not advocating for a ban because I don't want to go that way if we don't have to. But if someone's breaking the law, it doesn't mean you don't act on the law. It doesn't mean you don't make ordinances and change things to enforce something that's good for the overall community. And so just because people are doing it and not following the ordinance doesn't mean we don't create an ordinance and doesn't mean we don't create a ban.
And so just to be more specific, and I don't want to speak for all of us, I certainly can't, but specifically, you know, I'd be interested in the few houses with a lot of complaints, tracking down the ones that advertise for 15 and 30 people. And then what avenue can we go to be more aggressive with Airbnb and Verbo? And then how much resources from a staff perspective would that take? And are we willing, that you guys reasonably think you could spend? That's kind of the direction I'm going maybe for our next conversation. I know Laurel and then Angela.
No, I agree. On the record, I think that we have an ordinance that is strong and it has proven effective for the one property that's been a problem. So I would be willing to hear what you outlined. But I would like to stress that I would want to know what our city staff really thinks it would cost to enforce multiple different approaches to this. Because my concern is that we don't overburden beyond what we've already done for that one staff member who's responsible for licenses, that we are being very thoughtful about what resources we have available to us that we can expend on this. So I just want to stress that I would want to see that in anything that's brought before us.
Yeah, an honest assessment. Angela.
Yes, I agree with multiple people here, but my other thing is for these cities that I think Sierra brought up and some other people on the panel about the bans, even where they put a ban in place. So how does that look? Like if you're putting a ban in and people are still registering these or maybe not licensing them like we require, but how does that look? How do they do that and not, I guess I'm just asking, why can't they be enforced?
I talked to another municipality about how they go about enforcing with Airbnb and VRBO, and they said, and I think this probably might be true for that Valentine residents, when we told them they had to be under 10, they changed the listing while we were checking, but the second we stopped checking, they changed their listing and bump it back up. And so if we don't have somebody watching the listing every single day or somebody checking what's for rent every single day, we're gonna miss some.
Banned, like even at, let's say Prairie Village, for instance, that's someone local here. Why can they not? Why are these people still allowed to do it? I guess what I'm saying. I mean, I guess I'm just trying to understand the process of the law, right? There's criminal and
Sure.
what would this be listed as?
a civil.
A civil
Civil
more
issue.
matter, okay.
Important to note that Prairie Village their ordinance doesn't go into effect until November of 2025. So listings are still available on Airbnb for Prairie Village because they gave a year grace
Like a
period.
sunset. or-
Yes.
Yeah.
And so Prairie Village is probably still up and running up through November 2025. Leawood, when I look, it doesn't say it's in Leawood, it says it's in Kansas City. And so that's how they get around it, is nowhere on the listing does it list Leawood, because they could probably even list Missouri in their bubble. You know,
Yeah.
I'm guessing, pure speculation
Sure.
here, but I'm guessing that's how we're getting some listings there.
No, that makes sense. I was just curious, but you're right. You're saying they could get around it, so we
They
wouldn't
play the
know.
system,
Unless someone reported it to us, we really wouldn't know.
right?
Thanks.
What I'd like to do, and Tony, you can go next, but as we move forward here, it's probably a good time to solicit feedback from the audience, because we will come back and have another opportunity to speak as a council comments. So I'd like to do that soon, but Tony, go ahead.
Yeah, just real quick, I guess it's been brought up from a legal standpoint, other municipalities who have put in bans. Have we done any research on what's happening in other communities that have that? You haven't really needed to go down there because we have an ordinance, so giving you grace period on the question, but just in case you have done any preliminary work, can you speak on that at all by any chance?
When Prairie Village placed their ban into place, I think that they understood that that was going to solicit a lawsuit. Again, they're still in that grace period, so we're not going to know what's going to happen in November of 2025. We've heard rumblings that some short-term rentals are banding together to sue Prairie Village. But again, all speculation. And in addition to that, it's going to be costly to sue the city. And so somebody's going to have to front that money. All unknown. They haven't received any they haven't received any lawsuits yet. To my knowledge, Leewoods has been in effect for quite some time, so I don't know when that passed, if they had any lawsuits back then, but to my knowledge, Leawood also hasn't had any lawsuits
Yeah,
pending.
that was actually gonna be my next question, is because I know Leewood started this. I believe it was like 1998
Yeah, it's been
or
quite some
so. It's been
time.
quite a while, and as far as I know, they've never received a lawsuit, so
Couldn't say one way or the other.
thanks for that clarification.
Mike, and then hoping to move to public comment.
Yeah, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I feel like the sites listing these it's computer programming. I mean, they can have on there that Shawnee has a maximum of 10. So when someone lists theirs for more than 10, I don't understand why Airbnb or Vrbo can't just be like, sorry, this is not allowed. I mean, I don't understand how they're not helping us any, and they know exactly the addresses where these places are at. So that still baffles me how they're able to list something like that. I feel like if I had a listing of an unlicensed dentist here, you guys would have an issue with it because that's illegal. So I don't understand how they're able to do that and get away with it. The other thing is we're talking about overburdening staff. If we're collecting 94,000 in this transient guest tax for them, and we're missing out on 20 to 30,000 in licensing fees from the 40 to 60 that aren't licensed, I feel like that's 1 to 2 employees that can be dedicated solely to this job just on that revenue generated there. And if they just got to hit refresh every day to see if the listings are right, I mean, we got to do something. Because I was with Angela, I wanted the ability for people to operate properly. But if we're saying that we're not able to enforce any of that, except for one that took us forever to get done, I mean, that is not efficient. So, I mean, that makes me lean more towards Tony's solution. If we're not able to enforce this and do it the right way, I mean, I don't care how good it sounds on paper. If we're not enforcing it and doing it right, then we got to take some different action. So I'd love to see how this can maybe work better, but right now I'm really disappointed in how it's been implemented.
Good comments. Okay. Is there anyone from the audience that would like to speak on this item? Please. You got to come to the microphone.
Sorry. Not used to doing this. The one that's listed that has 30 people, go out the parking lot, go straight towards the police department, the big white house on the south side of the street with the big driveway down there. It's off the street. It has a sidewalk really close. That's the house that has 30 people in it. If you can see the house, we don't have that big of a city. You can tell which house it is. The house that's over here on past Shawnee Mission Parkway to the south, and it's over by that nursery. If you just drive around the neighborhood, you can see it. You can see which house it is. And like this little lady right here, I did not know she was coming. We don't have the time to keep doing this. And while you say that it's great for people that need another income, this is our home. This is our home. And I've spent 2 years trying to get this through to you guys that this is not going to work. And the more you do it, the more attractive it is for OJM LLC to come in and get more. They're still doing it across the street. They're doing it up the street. They have 400 properties in Johnson County. These aren't not little tiny single moms having these. These are corporations that are buying them. The one with this lady right here is a corporation in Topeka that is buying it. It's not little families trying to make some extra income. And when you stand here and you say, it's not that big of a deal, we should let people do it, because it's not next door to you. It's not across the street from you. It's across the street from us, living with it for 2 years. It's still going on. 7 young men, I think from another country, across the street from my house every night. Even when you put the ordinance in, they're still doing it. And Prairie Village, Leawood have a 1-800 number, take some of that $94,000, 1-800 number. People report it. People want to live in Leawood because they don't have to deal with this. They're going to keep coming to Shawnee. It's going to get worse because we're known for putting up with it. I'm so tired of coming here. I'm so tired of getting mad. I'm so tired of seeing the same things over and over. And it's finally getting through to some of you, but some of you still think it's okay because it's not in your neighborhood. We don't have any complaints in our ward. We don't have an HOA. Have you been to McInerney Estates? Big trees, no houses exactly the same. We want to live there. We don't have an HOA. If we did, it was 7 years ago. So you can say, oh, we don't have it because you have an HOA. We don't. Could you please pay attention to people who pay taxes more and more every year?
Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to speak? Seeing none, we'll turn it back to the council again for final comments. Paul, do you feel like you have what you need moving forward, or do you need additional clarification?
So let me attempt to get a consensus on a few items. So looking at an action plan to provide to the council, dealing with trying to do a better job, come up with a plan to get as many licensed as proactively as possible, whether that is existing staff, a service like Granicus, looking at how we can better get those 40 to 60 unlicensed licensed. We talked about looking into some of the legal issues dealing with some of these sites, maybe doing a little bit of research with what other cities are doing, and then trying to figure out what we maybe would be able to do. And then through those two processes, those would sort of give us a better handle on, we would have some mapping capabilities. Where are they? That could potentially be a public record that could be accessed by a homeowners association. For something like Miss King's, we reached out to the property again. They've, claimed it's a long-term rental. And so at that point, we're a little bit restricted on what we're able to do, that they have a 3-month rental at this point. And so we continue to deal those as we would with any public nuisance. But if I'm missing anything, track down, look at the legal ideas, come up with a plan to more actively monitor, come into compliance with a much higher percentage of these entities. That's kind of what I heard as a general consensus.
The only one I would add, and I don't know what recourse we would have, but what can we do to give teeth to these few that have had a lot of complaints?
So the 2 we've had, one's been revoked, and the other one, they would be considered, and I know it's not the same for the property owner, they would be considered minor violations, leaving your trash container out or something like that. We would really be watching for those noise complaints, disturbing the peace type things. We could certainly accumulate all those and present them to the governing body if they hit a certain number. However, I would caution, we do have some who call on one property because they don't like an Airbnb. So we had like the snow on the sidewalk. 50% of the properties in the city of Shawnee have snow on their sidewalk. So you do get into sort of a value judgment a little bit on what is a violation versus what is a common occurrence in most neighborhoods in the city.
Angela?
Just two quick things. Like the cities that have banned them, right? As far as what is do we have a number of people that are still running these Airbnbs regardless? And on the long-term rental thing, it just made me think, if she's got the 7 gentlemen living in that, I mean, that's legal, I'm assuming, right? If you have a long-term rental, you don't really have any I'm just asking. I don't know the actual.
So we have a co-living ordinance that regulates the amount of unrelated persons that can stay in a home. So we've made that company aware of our co-living ordinance, the regulations surrounding that.
Okay. And that co-living ordinance, is it the same process? Do they have to go through the court for that, or how does that work?
So it's almost impossible without asking for identification, birth certificates, which we don't really have the ability to have somebody prove that they are related. That's also under litigation right now, as we all know. And so we're sort of waiting to see what happens there.
Jacqueline?
Just one follow-up. I'm pretty sure, am I correct, that Prairie Village used to require all rentals, whether short-term or long-term, to register?
There are some other municipalities around us, yes, that require long-term rentals.
So
to
they
register as
then
well.
had that information on file. So hence why the lady that was here got a letter stating that she would no longer be able to operate a short-term rental if she had a short-term rental, whatever. Is there any way to then communicate to the residents of Shawnee and or possible short-term businesses that are operating out of a home? Is there any way to do something of that nature, where, especially in the case where you have, owner occupied short-term rentals that may not know that we've changed our ordinance? I mean, was that made public other than maybe a Facebook or a newspaper article?
We publish like we publish all of our other ordinances on our website, in the legal record.
So they may not even be aware that they need to register their short-term rental. Is that correct?
That's a possibility, yeah.
Okay, so if we could even notify our residents, whether they have, me as a resident, notify me that short-term rental policy has changed in the city of Shawnee. And I know all of that costs money. I realize that. But for some that don't know that that is something that they need to do and do want to be able to continue to have short-term rentals, you're single mom, whatever, but want that ability, but didn't even know that they needed to go through that process to do that. But then beyond that, maybe catch some of those. They're probably not going to come and sign up right away or at all, but I don't know. I'm thinking, Prairie Village had to get to where they are now by going through the hoops to have their homeowners and landlords do to register those homes. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of different ways to, not nobody knows what they're needing to do. That's why we have bills going before the House about small businesses, and because they don't know, they don't look up what the city requires, and so they aren't aware, and so then they get turned in by a neighbor. So I don't know. I don't know if that's possible, but looking into some piece of that, I guess. So.
Okay, so I think staff has what they need. Tony?
Yeah, sorry, Kurt, just to wrap that up, to that point. So if we're going to go down the road in discussion about changing the ordinances and trying to rectify it, 3 things, just so you can get it on the record. Citations for operating outside of the license should be a fee. Should be 24 hours after a revocation is adjudicated, my opinion, or as an option. And then if you've been revoked, you should have to wait a year before you can reapply for a short-term license. I think that's already in there, but yeah. Okay, that's what I thought, but just to make it clear, but that's kind of on the teeth side, just to kind of clarify some extra things. if that's the direction that we're gonna go. One other question I had, Lauren's here, I know, we expanded our town square district slightly, didn't we? Or did we end up keeping it the same? It's the same, okay. So again, I really think, you want to solve this problem and you want to still keep short-term rentals available in Shawnee for the World Cup, I say we restrict this to the town square of downtown Shawnee and any mixed-use facility. Boom, solves the problem. Take the ordinance we have, just rectify it that way. So I like to see that beyond the discussion table. Thank you.
Laurel.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify if you've been revoked, you have to reapply. That is for the property, not for the owner, correct?
I think that's correct.
I think internally, we've decided it's for the property.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure I remembered correctly. Thank
Right.
you.
Right.
Okay, anybody else? Last call. All right, thank you for a robust discussion for sure. Okay, this item was for informational purposes only, and that concludes our agenda. I will accept a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Again.
A motion has been made and seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion passes. We are adjourned.